What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the channel. Today I have an update video regarding the Pittsburgh Steelers franchise here in Madden 21, the connected franchise, and this is going to be episode 4 of this series, and we're going to update you on the team and the happenings and the trades and everything. And if you haven't noticed the title, we've made a very important move to help out the team, and we're going to recap things. We're not going to get into a game today. That will be in a separate video, but we will be playing that Browns game, and I have yet to decide whether that's going to be on video or not, but let's jump into the recap. First things first, I actually want to discuss a couple of re-signings that we did. We ended up deciding to, and you guys will see one of the big moves up top here. So if I go to my re-signed players and I go to the Pittsburgh Steelers, we ended up re-signing Juju Smith-Schuster, potentially slightly unrealistic for the Steelers. I think that the Steelers want to keep him around, and I think that he will take a reduced contract to stay here. I just don't know if they have the financial flexibility to make it work, because they do have contract signings coming up within the next year for guys like Minka and TJ Watt and quite a few big name players, and that might prevent them from re-signing Juju. But I worked through the numbers, and based on the way that I am going to handle the team's financial situation, we are going to have the cap space to keep Juju Smith-Schuster around. In addition to that, Bud Dupree has been playing fantastic for another year in his contract year, and I have the financial flexibility to manage to keep him around as well, so I decided to bring him in. And then the James Conner one, I decided to bring him back in because he's the Pittsburgh darling. I mean, he went to Pitt. You know, he's got one of the most inspiring stories in the NFL through college football and into the NFL. And I just can't see him walking away from Pittsburgh. If, even if it requires him taking reduced money, I could very well see him taking a small contract to stay in Pittsburgh, to stay in his home. You know, everybody loves him here, and so we decided to keep James Conner around for life, signing him to a 7-year deal. Now, like I said, these aren't necessary. Some of you guys might not view these as necessarily the most realistic re-signings in the world, but from a perspective of evaluating the financial situation of the team and evaluating their contributions to the team and evaluating, essentially what James Conner means to Pittsburgh, I think that it is potentially realistic that all three of these guys could return in the future if they can find the financial ability to do so. I think that these are all three players that Mike Tomlin feels strongly about, and he likes them, and they contribute to the team, so we decided to bring them back in. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about is the trades that we've done so far, so we can recap all the trades. We're going to go all the way to the bottom and start at the beginning. One of my first priorities was to essentially deal off Mike Hilton, because Mike Hilton is a potentially great player in this league. I mean, he's a very good slot corner for the Steelers, but he's in a contract year. And like I said, I think that it's more important for me to sign some of those other guys than it is for me to sign Mike Hilton, because I don't really feel like paying a slot corner a ton of money is a very good idea. So we traded away Mike Hilton to the Rams, who could use another corner. They didn't really have too much help there opposite of Jalen Ramsey, and so he could play slot, he could play on the outside, he would be fine there. And we got a 2nd-round pick and a 7th-round pick back in return. And just to describe a little bit of how we've gone through the value of these things, we decided that the value on this was fair because I put him on the trade block and I was offered a 2nd, a 5th, and a 7th. So we just subtracted the 5th out of it and took the 2nd and the 7th, because he is a young player with star. He's going to turn into a good player, especially in Madden. And then we brought back Sean Davis. This wasn't like really a trade. I mean, this wasn't me giving up anything. I brought Clay Matthews in out of free agency just to give him over to the football team for Sean Davis, because Sean Davis is actually on the Steelers now. So we brought Sean Davis back into the team. And same thing, I don't know if it's on here, but same thing with Joshua Dobbs. We cut Devlin Hodges and brought back in Joshua Dobbs because Joshua Dobbs made the team. Now, our next trade, and we're only allowed 3 trades in the season because that's kind of the average for the NFL is three trades per season, was we traded away James Washington to the Patriots for a 3rd-round pick. And I had mentioned before that, we have a huge stable of receivers, and I don't think that I can get them all the ball enough for them to progress, and I would rather get something back for one of them. And so one of the biggest things for me was getting back at least a 3rd-round pick for James Washington, because personally speaking, I think that the future of the team should be Juju, Deontay Johnson, and Chase Claypool. So that's the way that I decided to play it. We got a 3rd-round pick back for James Washington. And then the big trade was J.J. Watt. We wanted to unite the Watt brothers. We do not necessarily need J.J. Watt as a defensive end for this team because we have Alex Highsmith filling in, and we brought back Bud Dupree. But I think that there's a high likelihood, it's been talked about a lot, and J.J. Watt has expressed his openness to become a Pittsburgh Steeler and join his brothers, whether that be through trade or through free agency. And we decided to accelerate that process and bring him in while this team is competitive, because I feel like that's the way that makes the most sense, is while this team is competitive and Ben Roethlisberger's still around, that J.J. Watt should enter the picture and become a Pittsburgh Steeler. So in order to get J.J. Watt, we did a little bit of research, and we found a whole bunch of articles describing what J.J. Watt's value was. And J.J. Watt, essentially his value, because of how big his contract is and his injury history, is only projected to be about a 2nd-round pick. And so I decided to pay the Texans more to make it even more fair for them and give them a young running back that could help them out in Benny Snell. So I traded them Benny Snell Jr. I traded them a 2nd-round pick this year and a 2nd-round pick next year. And then we swapped corners. I took their older corner, B.W. Webb, and gave them a young corner in Cameron Sutton. So helping the Texans out, giving them the youth that they need and the draft picks that they could potentially use to really support Deshaun Watson as they move forward, and bringing in J.J. Watt to unite the Watt brothers. And so with that being said, there are a couple moves on the roster I'd like to show you, but just on a basic level, I want to show you how the lineup plays out. So, the offense really not changed here, but defensively speaking, it's going to be J.J. Watt at left end where he belongs, and I'm going to keep him on the same side as T.J. Watt because I want there to be essentially a Watt side to the football, basically a side that is completely shut down by 2 absolute monsters. Cam Hayward in the middle, and then Stephon Tuitt bumps it back over to right end. He's played this position before. Cam Hayward and Tuitt have switched back and forth at multiple points in their career. Hayward bumping inside at times, Tuitt bumping inside at times, them both flipping from left end to right end. So that's how we're going to play it as we move forward. Now, one other thing that I want to mention is a couple of just basic moves that we've made. So we're going to go through the roster position by position. Obviously, I said we brought in Josh Dobbs. At halfback, we're rolling with 3 running backs now. James Conner is the lead role. Anthony McFarland has been a huge contributor as the 3rd down back, and that's what his role is going to be. And then Jalen Samuels as the backup to both of them. No changes there. At wide receiver, I guess it's important to note that we're only going with 5 wide receivers, and they're 5 wide receivers that I actually trust quite a bit, and that's Juju, Deontay, Claypool, and then Deon Cain and Saeed Blacknell. Both players that I've used before and I actually trust quite a bit as kind of lower end wide receivers. Nothing new at tight end, nothing new at offensive line. Across the defensive line, we actually moved the outside linebacker Tazar Skipper to defensive end, and that is purely just because of his lack of speed and his kind of strength and block shedding and stuff like that. I mean, he kind of figures out to be a little bit more of a defensive end sized player. He's probably not going to be with the team for long, but I just wanted to note that we moved him to the end. And then at the outside linebacker position, I wanted to note that we brought in Sharif Finch out of free agency to be a rotational player behind T.J. Watt, a guy that has similar speed, not necessarily great moves or anything like that, but he at least has a decent finesse move at 71, so I like him a little bit out of tempo coming in as a rotational player. If I hadn't mentioned it before, we brought back Sutton Smith, who was a player that was drafted by this team, and then off of our practice squad we brought in a rookie, Jonathan Garvin, out of Miami, who I think could figure to be a decent player within a couple years. I mean, he's only 21 years old, so I like the prospect of having him on the roster, getting him some XP and building him up to be a player that maybe he could be successful in replacing Bud Dupree or something like that a few years down the line. So we'll see what happens with that. And if you guys aren't aware, these franchises that we run go for, upwards of 10 seasons. So, if you stick around with us for a while, you'll potentially see guys like Jonathan Garvin actually get their starting shot with the team. Nothing new, I believe, at the middle linebacker position, and then nothing new really elsewhere on the team. We did bring in Ryan Lewis, who's another Pittsburgh kid, to kind of fill out the corner position after the Mike Hilton trade, just to kind of fill out the bottom end of the roster. And the reason that we got B.W. Webb back in that trade from the Texans was just mainly because he's been with the team before, so it kind of makes sense that he would come back over, and he knows the defense, he knows the scheme, and he could plug right in and help out with the defense. And then I think that's about all. You guys see Sean Davis there at the end, and that's what we got in terms of moves and the roster and everything. Nothing drastic outside of the J.J. Watt trade, obviously. I mean, the other things are probably, in my opinion, pretty realistic moves that could happen with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, we're not going to 100% reflect real life, because this is me making a determination of what I think they should do, as opposed to what they will actually do, which we don't exactly know. But with that being said, let's go ahead and check out the stats on the season. Ben Roethlisberger's having a heck of a season, throwing for 1,400 yards so far, 14 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Not the best touchdown to interception ratio, but doing very well for himself, I would say, in his return to action. Mason Rudolph has gotten a limited amount of time, but he has 2 touchdowns and an interception. I actually really like what I see out of him, because he has a high completion percentage, and he doesn't really miss passes. And so when it does become time for him to take over the team, I'm pretty confident that he'll be able to do that with much success. James Conner, obviously the lead back, with 277 yards and 4 touchdowns. And then Anthony McFarland here with 184 and 2 touchdowns. One of the things that I want to note, though, as a key contribution from McFarland is the 249 receiving yards that he's added and 3 touchdowns. So if you really add up the 249 that he has receiving with his rushing yards, he becomes one of the highest contributors on this team, next to Juju. So I think McFarland is set up to be a future, maybe workhorse for this team. I know that we kept James Conner around, but McFarland is absolutely going to get the majority of the third down reps and the pass catching reps, and he might even rotate in at positions like receiver and stuff like that as we move forward. Eric Ebron's done very well for us with 388 and 3 touchdowns. Chase Claypool is doing pretty well as a rookie with 219 and 3 touchdowns. And then Deontay Johnson's been a little bit of a disappointment with only getting 10 catches and 160 yards. It just doesn't seem like he's really open as much. Maybe I need to work him out on the depth chart a little bit more and kind of move him around. Vance McDonald getting 75 yards and a touchdown, and then James Conner adding 40 yards receiving and no touchdowns. So that's how things stack out receiving wise, and they're pretty much lining up exactly as you would expect it. Juju is obviously going to be my number 1. Ebron is pretty much obviously going to be the number 2, and then it's a combination of McFarland and Claypool and Deontay Johnson from there. Blocking wise, we haven't had anybody give up really any sacks this year except for DeCastro giving up 1, which is absolutely fantastic that our offensive line is just being dominant for us in the pass blocking game. Defensively speaking, Devin Bush leads our team in tackles, but the one that I really want to point out is Ulysses Gilbert being very close second in tackles with 40 tackles, only 5 less combined tackles than Devin Bush. Ulysses Gilbert has been fantastic for us this season, even matching the tackles for loss and the sack numbers of Devin Bush. Devin Bush does have an interception on him, but I just wanted to point out the fact that Ulysses Gilbert has been fantastic for us, and I think that that's actually kind of a real-life thing. I believe that they plan for Ulysses Gilbert to get a lot of time opposite Devin Bush because they're trying to give somebody that's a little bit more athletic and a little bit more modern of a linebacker time next to him, because Vince Williams really can't do do that anymore. Mika Fitzpatrick has obviously done very well for us. He has 4 interceptions on the season, and so has Terrell Edmonds with 3 interceptions. I guess we can sort by interceptions. You guys can see Steven Nelson has 2, Devin Bush has 1, and Joe Hayden has 1. From a sack perspective, our leader is, surprise, surprise, TJ Watt with 4.5. Cam Hayward has 3.5. Bud has 3.5. Stephon Tuitt has 2. Devin Bush 1.5. Gilbert 1.5. Edmonds 1. Highsmith 1, and then a half sack for Justin Lane, and this half sack for JJ Watt obviously does not count. So, very good sack numbers. I believe we're first in the league in sacks and second or third in the league in interceptions. Again, surprise, like sarcastically saying that's a surprise because, this is one of the top defenses in the league. And then, what else? Forced fumbles. I believe we've had a couple of those by Devin Bush and Cam Hayward. And then we've had a couple of touchdowns, actually, defensively speaking, and 2 of them have come from Steven Nelson. So Steven Nelson has been a big performer for us so far, and Terrell Edmonds gaining a touchdown, and Bud Dupree actually... This touchdown was a blocked field goal, so I guess I should count that into effect that Ulysses Gilbert blocked not a field goal, he blocked a punt, rather, and Bud Dupree picked it up in the end zone. So yet another contribution from Ulysses Gilbert, who has just been having a stellar season for us so far. So that's all there is really to note for you guys defensively. Ulysses Gilbert being a standout there. Chris Boswell is consistent on the season with 4 for 4 for his field goals and 26 of 28 on his extra points. Punting-wise, we are waiting to do the move for Colquitt. He was picked up by another user, and Colquitt is actually on the Pittsburgh Steelers roster, so we're going to have to drop Jordan Berry at some point and pick up Colquitt. That just hasn't happened yet. Kick return-wise, we decided we're going with Anthony McFarland from now on because Deontay Johnson fumbled a punt return, if you guys watched that game against the Texans. And Deontay Johnson will not be the punt returner moving forward. It will be Anthony McFarland. Anthony McFarland has a better carrying rating, so it just makes sense to put Anthony McFarland at that position because he's just as athletic, has the same types of moves, and really just makes sense to put McFarland there instead of Deontay Johnson. So that's where we stack up in terms of numbers. I mean, I guess we could show you as it scrolls through here, Ben Roethlisberger's 4th in the league in passing. As it jumps forward to James Conner, he's not really high on the list in rushing yards, but he's doing solid for us. And then Juju's 4th in the league in receiving. So some good performers for us so far. Obviously, we're 4-1, and we came very close to being 5-0 and winning that game against the Eagles. Just a bad pass away from a touchdown that would have sealed that game for us. The division stands at 4-1, tied between the Bengals and Steelers, and we do have a game coming up against them in Week 10, which will be crucial for us. But the Ravens are also there, hot on our heels at 3-3, and the Browns are sitting at 2-3. I mean, nobody's necessarily out of the race yet. It depends on how things play out. With that being said, I think that that's pretty much what we have to recap for you guys today. And I guess I could note that we have a couple more contract negotiations that are going to be pretty important for us. And the number one is going to be Alejandro Villanueva. I am waiting till the offseason to negotiate with him because while this is kind of a fair price for him, we at this point don't have the cap room to re-sign him. And I'm going to have to shuffle some things around in the offseason to probably be able to re-sign him, and hopefully the value of his contract or desired contract goes down, primarily because of the fact that he is going to get to 32 years old and his overall is going to go down and things like that. So hopefully that works out for us. But, not a big deal personally speaking if we lose Villanueva or Alu, I think is going to be gone. Matt Filer probably will be gone. Not a big deal because we have 3 core linemen that I'm still very happy with. And I think what's going to end up happening is I'm going to end up using my draft picks to kind of replace some of the offensive line positions. And that's fine. We're going to need to backfill our roster with offensive line players because of all of the players that we've had to re-sign and the players that we will have to re-sign to big contracts like TJ Watt and Minka. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this update video. I know it's a little bit different, but hopefully you guys enjoyed, and if you did, make sure you leave a like on the video, comment down below with anything else you guys would like to see, and subscribe to the channel if you're new here. I'll see you guys in the next video, and I hope you guys have a good night. See ya.